Don Luskin, who's your pro-stock market candidate?
I mean this in all seriousness, Larry. Ron Paul.
If you became president, Congressman, what's some of the tough medicine you would give us?
Well, I think we should live within our means. I think we should balance the budget. I think we could do that by bringing our troops home and saving hundreds of billions of dollars on a foreign policy of interventionism. We should go back to the old right position, not the neoconservative position. We shouldn't be adding new entitlement programs. We should live within our means. I don't think this country can do well borrowing nearly $3 billion a day from places like Japan and China to service our account deficit. And we're leaving a $60 trillion obligation to the next generation. So this country's in serious financial trouble. And besides, although the market today was excited by good news on inflation, I saw some bad news in that. I mean, 5% inflation rate, and that's probably less than 2% or so of what's really happening. American people are sick and tired of inflation when they go buy their gasoline or pay their medical bills. So
yeah, but you can't, Congressman. I mean, we've got a pretty good economy going here, right? I mean, we've got productivity soaring. We've got retail sales that are strong. We've got corporate earnings that for the 19th quarter are up double digit. We've got a market chasing highs. I mean, this isn't happening in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, that's nice, but when you have to borrow, my personal finances would be very good if I borrowed $1 million every month, but someday the bills will become due. And the bills will come due in this country, and then we'll have to pay for it. We can't afford
Congressman,
this war,
did you say
we can't afford the entitlement
Did you
system.
say this 10 years ago when the numbers were similarly strong and we were still borrowing a great deal then?
That's right. That means the dollar bubble is much bigger than ever. And
so what do you say is going to what's going to happen?
We've had the NASDAQ bubble collapse already. We have the housing bubble is in the middle of a collapse, so the dollar bubble will collapse as well.
I believe we're really facing an economic crisis. In spite of the fact the government statistics tell us that everything is wonderful. There's no inflation, no significant unemployment rate, no worry about jobs. Forget about the deficits. Deficits don't matter. Don't bring up this silly notion of sound money. That is irrelevant. And they go on, and yet, if you think about it and you talk to your neighbor or maybe look at your own financial situation, you realize that this country is not nearly as wealthy as we think we are and other people think we are. When you think about it, everyone in this room, if you had a generous banker and he was willing to loan you $1 million a month and never ask you to return it, we could all look pretty prosperous. But bankers can't do that. After about 2 or 3 or 4 months, he might call the loan or quit loaning it to you, and all of a sudden you're seeing their living changes. This is the way this country is operating. We're operating on the idea that we have permanent prosperity. We have rejected the notion of free market capitalism and sound money and savings. We save nothing, but we have prosperity by overconsumption, by borrowing money. Not only individually, but by the corporations and by our government, and we're passing on these debts to the next generation. But we're borrowing, our national debt's going up approximately $500 billion every single year. We're financing a war by borrowing from places like China. We have to borrow between $2 and $3 billion every single day to finance our current account deficit. That's how much beyond our means that we're living. And it works fine until they quit loaning to us. And then all of a sudden, prices will go up, and interest rates will go up, and there'll be a lot of inflation. Some of you in this room, I'm sure, remember well what happened in 1979 and 1980. In order to protect and save the dollar, they had to bring interest rates up to 21.5%. And unemployment rate was 12%. It was the worst condition since the Depression. And we had inflation rate. They admitted to the prices were going up at a rate of 15%. Today they claim, no sweat, prices are only going up 2.5%. But in order to get to those numbers, we have to fudge the figures. We have to change the calculation of the CPI, and we have to omit housing and energy and food. So if you don't eat and you don't drive and you don't have any medical bills, then you don't have much inflation to worry about. But you know, there's some very good reasons to be for sound money. There's a moral reason. It's deceitful, distrustful for governments to participate in counterfeit because they are debasing the value of money. They're stealing from us. It's a form of taxation. So it's a moral issue as much as anything. In one of the debates, they asked about what tax we would like to get rid of. And of course, I had claimed that I had already addressed the subject of the income tax, and we took care of that one rather easily. So I brought up the subject of the inflation tax. A lot of people don't quite understand that. How can you call this a tax? Well, when you spend beyond your means, you can tax so much, you can borrow so much, and then they still come up short, and then they print. That lowers the value of the money. And who suffers the most from the prices going up? Do the people in the government? No. The people in government, the politicians and the bureaucrats thrive on it because they spend the money first and the value of the dollar is still higher. As the money circulates, then of course the people who are mainstream, middle class, poor people get the inflation tax. Their prices go up. So truthfully, I believe their inflation right now, their cost, the loss that they have to the purchase power of their dollars, probably well over 10%. So somebody is literally stealing from them 10% of their hard-earned income every year. That's why they don't want the secret out of the bag, because this is the gimmick that they've been using and will continue to use. And it serves the interests of special groups. None of this could happen without the Federal Reserve System, and more reason why we have to work to get rid of it. I can't imagine how the people can accept the notion that a government that nearly everybody in the country now distrusts turns over to the government this power to work in collusion and secrecy with the central bank to create money out of thin air to pay the bills, and then they wonder why we have problems.
Transparency in monetary policy is a goal we should all support. I've often wondered why Congress has so willingly given up this prerogative over monetary policy. Congress, in essence, has ceded total control of the value of our money to a secretive central bank. Congress created the Federal Reserve, yet it had no constitutional authority to do so. We forget that those powers not explicitly granted to the Congress by the Constitution are inherently denied to the Congress, and thus the authority to establish a central bank was never given. The dollar today is worth only 4 cents compared to the dollar that the Federal Reserve started with in 1913. This has significant consequences on our economy and our political stability. Our monetary system insidiously transfers wealth from the poor and the middle class to the privileged rich. Wages never keep up with profits on Wall Street and the banks, thus sowing the seeds of class and discontent. When economic trouble hits, free markets and free trade are often blamed, while the harmful effects of a fiat monetary system are ignored. We deceive ourselves that all is well with the economy and ignore the fundamental flaws that are a source of growing discontent among the various groups. Few understand that our consumption and apparent wealth is dependent on a current account deficit running at approximately $800 billion a year. This deficit shows that much of our prosperity is based on borrowing rather than a true increase in production.